What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Today, I have a very special guest who just visited the archives of the impossible. There is a conference that is annual at Rice University in Houston, Texas, where Professor Jeffrey Kripal and everybody who works alongside him um, create a space where people who are investigating different types of phenomena talk about this in an open manner and at a university. So it's really exciting. I already have Professor Kripal on the show, but today I have Mr. Anthony Miller, host of Obliterate the Construct, who is also a media analyst, which is how I met him on here on online. Welcome to the show, Anthony. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Pablo.
So first, before we get into the uh, archives of the impossible, which I'm sure you had a blast there, I wanted to ask you about your podcast because it's called Obliterate the Construct, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
And when I heard you talking about the stuff you talked there, the first video I saw you, it was when you said that there are a couple of series or films that kind of describe what might be going on. Can you expand on that a little bit and talk about your podcast, what you do there, and who you talk to?
Sure. Diving right into it.
Yes.
Yeah, those shows that you're referring to, that did not come from me. Um, that was during my first truly anomalous experience that I basically went looking for. That I developed this ritual type protocol involving psilocybin mushrooms, breath work, meditation, shamanic drumming music. I was like throwing everything at the wall at this protocol that I
Okay.
wanted to create to have this like consciousness expanding positive experience with non-human intelligences. And it worked. It worked the first time around after a lot of prep work and strong intent and yeah, and what I received in that experience, which came, it's a long experience. And I don't want to take too much time on it, but there was this being that manifested visually in front of me in my mind's eye. This was all done with my eyes covered, lying down, and it was surrounded by 8 or 9 other entities that I could not see, and this being was communicating as a hive mind, connected to all these other entities and like connected to me. It was this profound experience of, I guess we would call it telepathy, but in the moment, I wasn't thinking like, oh, this is telepathic communication. It was just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is how this works. I know this. This is familiar. This is just how we do things. And I've forgotten this, and we all knew this, and we've all forgotten this. So during that exchange that happened there, these beings, through the one that I could see, gave me a lot of information, which I discussed partially in our first episode on Obliterate the Construct. But as part of that information that came through, they showed me like I had 3 full-on video montage scenes play out in front of me in this space that I was in, from that showed scenes from series that I had watched before. And they gave me 3 series. One was the show Moon Knight, from the Marvel universe, which is unlike any other Marvel show. So don't worry if you're not into superhero things. And the other show was this show called Ragnarok, another Netflix series, I believe, a Norwegian series. And the third one was the OA, one of the
Yeah.
first Netflix series. And these all had differing themes, seemingly, and different approaches to anomalous experiences. Moon Knight takes place in modern day Egypt for the most part, and had this element that we see a lot in the literature now, especially with Jeff Kripal's work around trauma and neurodivergence. And the main character was neurodivergent and experiencing what he thought was some sort of psychotic break, and maybe multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
And during that, he started receiving communication, or he was exposed to communication with this being that identified itself as the Egyptian god Khonshu. the god of time and the moon, and this like guardian of the realm of Earth. And the interesting theme in that was this notion that the gods, the Egyptian gods, the way that they interfaced with humanity, because there was some agreement they made to not interfere directly with humanity, the way they did this was through avatars on Earth. And that's kind of the premise of that show. And things were happening where they didn't want to interfere, but they kind of had to, and that was kind of the debate of the whole show. The other one, Ragnarok, the Norwegian one, very similar theme. And when I had watched it prior to this experience, none of this was going through my mind. It was completely different. But in that show, the main character, also neurodivergent. We don't know exactly like what was going on with him, but a teenage kid, and he has this experience with this woman in his town who I believe was like the incarnate form of the goddess Freya, I think, one of the main goddesses from the Norse pantheon of gods. And because he like helps her early on in the series, she imbues in him this energy that allows him to start essentially incarnating as the god Thor and developing his abilities. And later on, he realizes that she did this because, again, like the first show, that there are these other entities who have done the same thing through humans on Earth and were nefariously trying to intervene and interfere in affairs on Earth. And he had to stop them because that was not like that did not fit with his code, and it was breaking this agreement they made to not interfere directly. So similar theme there.
So with
And
these two, before you continue though,
yeah,
with these two, we see a theme of um, ancient gods, which is
yeah,
something that I've been fascinated with for a while, and something that we know Tom DeLonge talks about. And I've heard other people talking about it as myth, but we need to understand though that there were people back in the day, and even today, that still see that as real. Um, where do you stand on that? Do you think they're just allegories, or do you think it's actually somewhat real, or it may be real?
oh, I totally think it's real, but I don't think it's real like we think it is, generally speaking. I think it's and this has come through in some of my subsequent experiences following my protocol, that these things that we call beings, in this case gods, are. By the way, the first thing those beings told me in my experience was, "We're not gods, but you made us into gods." That was the very
Yeah.
first thing they communicated, and they were kind of laughing at us the way that a parent would laugh at a child when they do something silly. That was the first communication. But back to this, I believe that based on my experiences, currently believe, by the way, I'm not closed off and absolutist in my viewpoints. I
Good.
think that they show that they are these types of like archetypal energies that exist in this like substrate of consciousness that can sometimes permeate our physical bodies through different protocols and modalities, and depending on where we are in life. And these energies, because of various constructs we have developed through our time as a species, and we kind of box things off as under religious paradigms or cultural paradigms. Because of that, these archetypes have very specific ways in which they manifest for people through the collective consciousness. And they may have certain visuals that are familiar, or names or notions. And I think that's part of this like co-creative element that is more at the true nature of reality, where it's a mix of our own constructs and ancestral beliefs, and all of this, and where we are in our life at our current point in our life, that helps co-create how we view these beings when they do permeate, our individuated consciousnesses.
Yeah. And
That makes
the
sense.
the OA though, that talks about near death experiences, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's what you took the most out of that one from your experience?
Um, that one, yeah, it talks about near-death experiences, but also like the various more psychical type capacities that come online for some people after near-death experiences in the literature and research. Um, that one, I didn't realize this till after my first experience, but I think the element they were trying to show me within it was this uh, more psychosomatic element to these experiences that can sometimes complement them when you're connecting with that realm. In that, I started having, if you remember in the show, for those who haven't seen it, there's like these hand movements and bodily
Yeah.
movements that come up as a way to really bring forth what was experienced in these other realms to help access the capacities and abilities, and in this case like shift timelines essentially. um and what I found starting to happen to me throughout my experiences on this protocol were these like semi-autonomous to sometimes fully autonomous hand movements that would start happening to my physical body while my consciousness was having these experiences. And I would be totally aware of it, that my hands were basically moving on their own. And I could stop it if I wanted to. But it was like something needed to come through to allow me to both maintain the connection with that realm and in some cases to amplify the connection. And the first thing that came through for me were mudras, um, hand symbols from like Hindu and yogic and Buddhist traditions. And that was never part of my paradigm growing up or part of my research or anything. But two specific mudras came through that my hands automatically formed during this first experience. And now I hold those during meditations. I hold them when I do this protocol subsequently.
Makes you think how much the Hindu really knew, right? And how
Yeah.
deep they got in
Yeah.
ancient knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I've also been told by other experiencers that these were also part of like ninja traditions, so even
Yeah,
beyond Hindu and Buddhist traditions.
yeah, they are. Um, that's fascinating, man. I want to ask you about your podcast though, because you have a co-host too, and you
Yep.
guys speak to experiencers generally, but is that the only type of people that you want to have on the podcast, or you want to talk to everybody?
No, definitely not. The idea behind it is to like coming from my own background as a media analyst and open source intelligence analyst, I've realized how important information and language is to shaping reality. And I feel like once I got into these fields, I've noticed obviously how much disinformation comes into play, but how much that had to do with the stigma around these topics and the just the cognitive dissonance that the muggles and the normies have around these topics. And it's really how reality is shaped for a lot of people, and reality is deeply subjective in terms of that. And that's one thing I've been told in my experiences as well, is this subjectivity of reality. And the use of language, I believe, and the way in which we have these dialogues, and they should be more dialogues around these topics, can really break through the constructs, which is why I called the podcast that. And as part of that, you know, we want to center experiencers because they're the ones having the most direct interface of these experiences and the most direct information. But oftentimes every experiencer has their own, you know, subjective approach to what they experienced, that is not always stagnant, that can be fluid. And there can be a lot of retrospection that changes people's takes on their own experiences. And there's a lot of siloing and bucketing that happens around things. We see it online all the time. We see people, even who are themselves experiencers, trashing other experiencers' accounts because it doesn't fit with their own paradigm or their own experience. So I want to break through those walls, both within the space and outside of the space, and within that, across disciplines. So not just addressing, you know, the metaphysical community, but or the neuroscientific community, but I want people who are into physics. I want people who are into astronomy, into philosophy and the humanities. So we're also bringing on academics and scientists and thinkers in these fields to see how they view things and what they're finding in their own research. And also one thing that gets left out a lot is the religious communities, the religious
Yeah.
supernatural and mystical experiences, which I think like there's a huge history of that. And most people on this earth follow some sort of mainstream religion, even if we don't in the West for the most part. It's there and it's a huge part of people's lives, and it helps, unfortunately, like create these structures of information that are very closed off. And I want to start a discussion that starts slowly breaking down the walls between these disciplines in order to help reshape reality to what I believe is a greater reality that is all around us.
Yeah. When it comes to misinformation, though, I do want to talk about this with you because we're both media analysts. That's how I was trained.
Mm.
And I at first when I've been on this for a little over a year only.
Oh,
And when I
wow.
first got when I
You
first
seem
got
like a
in,
pro.
well, that's 15 years of journalistic experience.
Yeah.
That's why it kind of seems like I've been at this for a while, but no. Um, and it took me a little time to identify that there is a narrative that is not true, that is very prevalent within the UFO community, and that a lot of people believe. And that's what really initially I was like, okay, so there's an Ashtar command. Okay, so there's a galactic federation. Okay, so there's like 30 different races. And then I realized I'm like, nobody knows what they are. That's the reality. Although there may be different types of intelligences, the reality is that we don't know if they are like corporeal beings 100% or ethereal beings or 100%. So, and that's as far as I go right now because I am also open to changing my mind on what's going on. The only
Yep.
things that I've been able to identify as real are the things that I've experienced. And you were talking about how subjective experiences can be. I don't really talk about many of my experiences because they're so out there, so weird that I know that people are going to judge me, and I want to ease into it little by little. It's not like I'm not going to talk about them, just that give me a little time. And I've already talked about some.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to ask you, how did you navigate that when you first got into this? Because it was really tricky for me at the beginning, man. That misinformation and learning how to identify who's honest, who's not. It's
Yeah.
not easy.
No, it's not, and that's why I think I'm thankful for my own like professional background as a media analyst, because that was exactly what we did on the job. Was to we were trying to ingest as much information as possible from as many sources as possible, but the very first step of that process was source identification and like source analysis. So we had to look at sources of information to gauge for sentiment, to gauge for credibility and legitimacy and all of that. And then even after you've done that and you start collecting information from all these sources, you start realizing, at least I did, thankfully, that even the ones that the general mainstream may view as credible or legitimate or unbiased or less biased, you start seeing those biases. You start
Yeah.
seeing that they are also involved in misinformation and disinformation. So
Yep.
you start realizing that the best way to actually come to a picture that is nearer to the truth is to really shed all your assumptions and just be open and use various forms of discernment, including intuition, including your experience, and through like a wider discourse with different members of this community, without those assumptions. That's key. Without the assumptions and without the absolutism, I think you can begin to develop a clearer picture of what's going on.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's really funny because some of those people that you talk about that are also engaged in misinformation, some of them are even engaged in conflict of interests that they don't make public to the people.
Yeah.
And that's a major issue right now within the people involved in the disclosure movement, because they claim to be doing something in public, but their actions say something different. And when you realize that they're hiding those actions, that's when it gets really tricky. And that's when, whenever I approach someone at the top asking them a question, I already know that something is gonna feel uncomfortable for them. And I try to do it as like diplomatically as possible, but there are some things that you just can't avoid asking. And that's gotten me into a little bit of rift with some people. But I know that at the end of the day, whenever we like meet in person or like interact a little bit more, they're gonna know that I'm harmless. Really, I'm just asking questions. I don't have an agenda or anything like that. And I've been accused of being like a Mexican intelligence asset and shit like that. And I'm like, dude, I'm just a sports journalist from Tijuana. Stop that. you
Yeah.
know, who's really curious, granted. But yeah, you spoke to Sarah Gamm recently, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to ask you what's because when she came out not that long ago, and I found some inconsistencies in some of the things she said and some of the things that, for example, Linville Logan has said
Mm.
about some of the stuff they looked at, contrary opinions. Um, in terms of that, how did you see the reception on Sarah when she first came out?
Um, I it was the same reception that most people receive coming out of the government or former government communities that talk about these topics. Yeah, I also noticed there was a lot of this. I feel like is innocent conflation of information that someone may put forth someone misinformed may put forth, whether it's like someone's job title, what it was,
Yeah,
you know, the difference between supporting the UAP task force and officially being a member of the UAP task force. And
semantics.
yeah, and then you have podcasters who may edit the title of their show to get more clicks and make it seem like someone was something they weren't, just with a little semantic change. And then that kind of takes off on social media and it becomes like, oh, this person's being deceptive or something. And you don't really trace back to where that discrepancy may have started. So I saw that with Sarah. I think she's a very honest person about what she did and what her role was. But I noticed there were these discrepancies that arose probably very innocently on social media just because of the weird convoluted nature of these structures and maybe the informal nature of some support systems around the UAP task force, that led to a lot of confusion and paranoia. Um, Now, I think uh, there's a way to be cautious about all of this without being paranoid, and I think you do a great job at it. I think that's the way to do this, and just keep things at arm's length when you have new people coming out as whistleblowers or witnesses with claims, whether experiencers or otherwise, especially if connected to the government. And I would say keep in mind that there's a lot of dark claims and dark accusations around these secretive programs that we're discussing around the disclosure movement. And it was never going to be an easy task to shine the light on this. If you have expectations that Congress is going to do it 100%, I think you are being a little naive. If you think we're going to get all the information through our justice system, I think you're also being a little naive because I see injustice all the time in that. And you see how powerful people get away with things all the time. So I would say be cautious of people coming out who may have had connections to legacy programs that involve claims of wrongdoing, because if this information is going to come out and if those people are going to be at the face of certain disclosures around these topics, there is either going to have to be a legal reckoning or some sort of rehabilitation or rebranding campaign. And that can be innocent, or it could be nefarious, or somewhere in between. And I think it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I feel the same way you do. A good example, perhaps, could be Jason Sands, because a lot of the people that I know from either the military or the intel community claim that his core story, they believe it's real. And I noticed that some of the people that wanted to reach out to him, like personally, they've gotten followed and stuff like that. That gets really serious. So
Mm.
if even if you hear one of those stories that sound really out there, you never really know why is people like keeping tabs on him if his story is so out there and
Yeah.
unbelievable. Um, I wanted also to ask you, and this is like more from up to date stuff, because just yesterday, as everybody knows, Skywatcher released their episode 2. Did you get to see it?
Yeah, just quick. I watched it quickly, and I didn't like rewatch it in with focus. But yeah, I did see it.
What were your overall thoughts about it?
I thought it was fascinating. I thought I saw some, like, the various classes they had for UAPs. Some of them I hadn't seen discussed publicly before. That was interesting. The videos truly looked anomalous, and I like the fact that they're opening it up to researchers and scientists and others to try to from third parties to try to get, you know, unbiased and independent takes on this. Um, I can't speak because I wasn't there. I can't speak to the actual sourcing of this and how legitimate that is. I'm sure for those who become involved in this process, that they would be shown and given the metadata that would show that these are legitimate.
There's actually
So
a way to request for the data, and they will give it to you. They said that
cool.
publicly. So
Okay,
yeah,
that's great. Yeah,
yeah.
so to me, that's great. That's great that this is coming out to the public. Um, I don't know if this is what it takes, like, to have this type of organization that involves former members of the legacy program, who themselves discussed how, on various interviews that have come out so far, they've discussed, uh, some shady activities that they used to take part in as part of that program. Um, and there were discussions about, the rumors we hear around the gate program, around children being involved in these psionic sub programs within this. And it was discussed briefly in some interviews, but it was kind of glossed over. So yeah, I mean, that my concern is that I don't want people in the community to be distracted by what could be a legitimate way of putting out this information to wider segments of the public, and just completely forget about the injustices that may have been done by some of these programs. I think we can do multiple things at once, and we should.
You and I are on the exact same page, dude. And this is something that, as you know, I've told you before, off the record, not off the record, but not on the air, that I'm investigating the case of Greenberg. I think that he was taken against his will in 1994. He has all the traits of one of these scientists that would be part of these programs and training people and all that, because he studied shamans for like 2 decades. He trained kids to with the eyeless sight. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's done a lot of like actual scientific work on ESP. That's what he did. That was his whole thing. He founded the Mexican Institute of Consciousness, which actually closed off when he disappeared. And this doctor, the fact that I'm asking about him to bigwigs and to people that I know should know something, this is what is making them the most uncomfortable when I approach them.
Wow.
And there was one instance where I um, tried to ask someone who knows Dr. Hal Puthoff about Greenberg. And I
Mm.
didn't give any details. I just told him that I was investigating the case of a doctor that Dr. Puthoff and Dr. Valet may know. And this person told me they snapped. They were like, "I'm not going to talk about any conspiracy theories, and that's if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to talk to you." And I was like, "Wait, I didn't
Mm.
say Dr. Puthoff was guilty of anything. I didn't say Dr. Valet was guilty of anything. I just said they may know him. You were
Yeah.
the one who assumed that I was accusing them of something. So what gives, man?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as this person realized that I wasn't really trying to accuse anybody of anything, their attitude changed back to like more docile kind of.
Yeah.
But that really, I'm there with you. I think that we need to get accountability for a lot of these things that even today keep happening. Um, you know about MK Ultra and the Stargate program and all of that stuff. Honestly, I don't think Stargate ended. I just think it went darker and it
Yeah.
changed names.
I agree.
And who knows what they've been doing with consciousness. I've heard of multiple people saying that it can't be weaponized. I disagree. I think it can. I think a lot of the social media that exists today is used to manage collective consciousness,
I agree.
you know?
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. And I hope that these guys understand that we're not, well, at least in my case, I don't think that they even are involved in any of that. I think that they have clues and information that can help us investigate this, but I'm not like accusing them of anything.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
The
I'm right there
concern.
with you, man.
Yeah. The concern I have is when you whitewash historical wrongdoings or history in
Yeah.
general, and you create a new narrative based on a whitewashed history, then you're like this saying, like you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's not the way forward. Um, there should be some sort of maybe like a truth and reconciliation type committee to really get all this out. And it doesn't mean like punishing people who are involved necessarily. It just means acknowledging what happened and realizing where we went wrong as a country and as a government and as a military industrial complex. And because whatever new way we end up in beyond after this, if it's not based on that, then it's going to be based on a false starting point, a false assumption, and who knows what can come out of that.
And anything that starts that way, it can end really badly, though.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
we need
Even if
to
well intentioned.
course correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So thank you for that. I kind of imagined that you and I would be on the same page there. Um, and yeah, I know it can get really uncomfortable for some people talking about this, but it needs to happen. They need to understand that we don't mean to like accuse anybody of anything. Just find out what happened. That's it.
Yeah.
And yeah, meant some mistakes. And I guess that me not being an American, that also has something to do with them feeling wary of asking questions. Uh, have you noticed that because you do have more access than the normal person, you know? And that's one of the things that surprised me the most about where I started seeing you pop up in pictures and events and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, so he knows how to get around. And uh, due to your work line of work, do you think that's one of the recent reasons why maybe you have this a more level of access with some of the involved people here?
No, honestly, it was more my I think initially it had to do with my actual physical location near DC.
Okay,
I live
cool.
just outside of DC. And the way that it was really like a series of synchronicities that got me started in terms of these connections. And it started with a decision I made in fall of 2023 to attend one of Sean Kirkpatrick's final hurrahs on his way out.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah, right. Because he was speaking at my former grad school at a think tank, the Hayden Center in George Mason University's School of Public Policy. So I saw that and I was like, oh, yeah, I'll check it out. It's like a 30-minute drive. I went to grad school there. There's probably going to be some interesting people in the audience. And I know that Kirkpatrick is going to spew his usual bullshit. I don't know if I can curse here, but
oh yeah, you
uh,
can.
all right.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, so I fully knew what to expect from him and the event, but it was more about trying to network in the audience because I knew there would be like-minded people probably there. So I ended up after the event, there was like a little social hour, and I met some interesting younger people, and they have since become very good friends of mine. One was just very young, like in his 20s, and was just there because he's interested in this topic, and he lived up the street. And the other is like he works adjacent to academia and was also interested in these topics and is an experiencer. So they attended for the same reasons I did, and we ended up meeting. And one of them was deep into these consciousness circles, more from like the multidisciplinary consciousness circles. So yeah, just meeting him kind of launched me down these rabbit holes and connections that, like within a few months, I was connected with scientists at the Division of Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia, and several of them are now good friends of mine. I met people at the Pari Center in Italy, a mutual friend of ours, Alex Gómez-Marín, the director there.
That's what
Um,
I want to talk to you about after you finish.
yeah. So that really launched me. The Scientific and Medical Network. I attended their retreat last summer in Europe. So it became this like domino series of synchronicities with a lot of very interesting anomalous ones in there mixed in that led me down these routes. And then actually, and this is what I would tell people, that just going out physically to events and conferences is completely different from just, being in this space on social media,
Oh yeah.
because you do get to have those conversations on a more intimate level with people, and you never know what they'll say after a few drinks too. and
Yeah.
and they see you more as a person rather than just this like anonymous face on social media or anonymous username, and that allows a more authentic form of dialogue to take place. And you would be surprised at both how synchronicities arise after authenticity like that with yourself and with others, and just how connections build afterwards. So that's really how I got here.
Yeah, and about Alex, I want to ask you about this though, because
Yeah.
yeah, I know that Alex approached me when he was first like trying to think of this, and he asked me who I would keep on a list, and I named all of these ladies, and I actually helped him connect with Chrissy Newton. But I understand that you helped out in getting some of these ladies to agree to this, didn't you?
No, that was not me personally. No.
No. Okay.
No.
Cool.
No, friends of mine are part of the Scientific and Medical Network, which is hosting this in conjunction with Alex and the Pari Center.
Yeah.
But because the SMN is the primary hosting body, I have friends who are part of that who are coordinating with Alex to get some of these other people.
Did you like see it happen in real time as it was being put together?
No, I wasn't part of that team. No.
Okay. Cool. And what are you expecting from this? Because I know that some of these people personally, like Dr. Anna Brady Estevez, right?
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
Julia as well. I've met Julia. Yeah.
You know Dr. Mosrich too. Okay. So I wanted to ask you about Anna because I know that she's a very private person sometimes, but she recently came out on that Ecosystemic Futures podcast.
Mhm.
And man, she really made an impression on me because she was like really quick and really witty about the way she approached this. And it took me by surprise that she seems to know Dr. Putoff personally, and she got him to say some things that I've never heard him say before. So, um, how do you know her, and what do you think she can bring to the table now that she's more public about what she's doing?
Mm. Um, I met Anna just through my DC connections, just being like going down these rabbit holes with individuals around consciousness and around UAPs in the DC area. Um, uh, some of whom were like adjacent to uh, some of whom have like professional organizations who are interested in UAP, some who are former government, some who are just connectors of people in these spaces, and trying to do the work like I'm doing on my podcast with trying to break down the walls between dialogue. They're doing it more behind the scenes across more official communities and disciplines. And that's how I met Anna, was through that. And I mean, she's a freaking breath of fresh air in
Yeah,
that space. And she's amazing in person as she is on the podcast. Um, and yeah, what she's doing there is just I don't know how she met Hal, by the way. But um, if anyone has had a chance to listen to those interviews or those like day long series that are up on YouTube, the way that she presents these topics is, it's almost like she's changing the starting assumption to, yeah, this is real, and we're not even going to discuss that.
yeah,
We're going to start there. We're going to skip that, and we're going to start from, how can this be applied to your discipline and your discipline and your interest, and whether it's physics or aerospace or technology or human potential. So when I see her doing that from her position, high up in the NSF, the National Science Foundation, and a very respected person, I think others see that as an example, and it almost gives them the green light and the permission to take these topics seriously, what they may internally have always taken them seriously, but they're afraid because of the disciplinary stigma within their fields. So that's what I
yeah.
like about this.
I don't know why, but she keeps giving me this feeling like she has seen some shit, you know, like she knows some stuff that eventually she will be able to share. I'm pretty sure because
I'm pretty
she's
sure
been at this. Yeah,
she discussed it publicly on one of the shows. It was like in passing, but she did mention that she's seen. I believe she said she's seen UAP or UFOs. I forgot how she termed it, but she did say it publicly on one of the podcasts, like as an from a personal sighting, not like something on the
yeah,
show.
that's what I was gonna say. Because given her position, it's important to make that distinction. Because if she has a position like that and she claims to have seen something, one can easily think that she did it in a classified setting or something like that. So
No,
thank
not
thank you
no.
thank you for
I don't think so.
clarifying that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. She said like individually. Yeah,
Okay, so uh, I can't wait to see what she has cooking for us. I can't wait to hear her speak with Alex because to me, Alex is another breath of fresh air, as you say.
yeah.
He's
Oh
been
yeah, he
doing
is.
some really interesting stuff. He and I became really good friends, and I think that he is also looking at it on a similar perspective to Anna. Um, and the fact that he's a PhD also helps a lot, though, because
Yeah,
um, a lot of doors are open to people who do have a PhD and are open to discussing these topics. So yeah. Okay, so I just want to talk about this past weekend, man, because You
Sure.
attended
If you
the
don't mind, before we get into that, I want to say one
yeah,
last thing on this.
yeah, of course.
As these like connections for me have expanded and I've gotten into these communities, it really reminds me of I attended this talk that Grant Cameron conducted in summer 23, my first like the first event I attended publicly, and it was the MUFON Symposium in Cincinnati, the national one in 2023. And Grant Cameron was one of the speakers. And his entire presentation was about this, for the most part, was about this like theory of wow, I think he calls it. This notion that like the way in which the phenomenon manifests in people's lives and different people throughout history seems almost like this hidden hand guiding things. Um, and that may be why it like shows up to some random farmer in the countryside, or some person who's working in a completely different field, and we don't really know how those experiences kind of like trickle down and out into the future. Um, and what I've noticed is that, let's say, like, once you dig in, and like I mentioned earlier, if people have had a few drinks in them as you're talking to them, you start to notice that there's a lot of experiencers in academia and in science in these fields who are public facing, and have not talked about these experiences because they're private about it, and that's fine. Um, some are concerned about the stigma. Some are concerned about already being in a field that is stigmatized, and then on top of that, adding that they've had their own experiences, whether it's UFO related or paranormal related. Um, but I do think that like it seems like different people have been tapped in a way by these phenomena at various stages in their lives to create this calling almost that manifests differently for different people, but
Yeah.
that seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be like playing a role in all of these converging forces around uh, a greater groundswell for breaking through the more illusory nature of reality and getting us to see that there is a greater reality out there.
Yeah. And I would say that everybody is an experiencer to some extent, right? Because we've all, like, pretty much everyone I know has seen some weird stuff at some point or experienced something that they didn't understand. And they've always been trying to answer what the hell was that, you know?
Yeah.
And some of these people forget about these experiences, especially the ones that experience them when they're little. They, the classic, yeah, I had an imaginary friend and stuff like that. Some of that stuff is not imaginary. They did talk to something, and that's another aspect of this is the stigmatization that you talk about, because for the longest time I thought that I was crazy clinically, you know, and I lived with that stigma for many, many years, especially due to how stigmatized substance usage was in my family, because I come from a
Mm.
family of doctors. My mother and my father are both doctors, and um, I grew up with that. And then when I realized that there were a lot of people that went through similar experiences to mine, then I started looking more into the literature, and I was like, okay, so maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I did see or talk to that something
Yeah.
at that specific point in time. So now I have a new outlook. And yeah, you're right. It's not easy. There is a lot of stigma. And I would imagine that people with PhDs and all of these high positions of power are feeling a little bit more comfortable lately, because that stigma seems to be receding a little bit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is, and it is this like domino cascading effect that happens, and we all do it. Like you said, you self-censored for your own reasons, and they're totally like justifiable and honest, and we all get it. Everyone does it. So I would say like don't judge people who don't talk about their experiences, and you know don't think that these academics and scientists are hiding things from you because they've had their own experiences and don't talk about it publicly. I think things are just they're naturally flowing into the right space that we're going to be in soon, where this stuff is more openly discussed.
I keep going to that book, the Tao Te Ching, it's named, the Book of Tao. It talks
Okay.
about that, how
Really?
everything is supposed to be going the way it's going.
Yeah.
And it all ends up falling into place at the end of the day. And I like that philosophy. I think it rings true in a lot of senses, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that though.
Of course. Yeah.
So yeah, let's go to this. You went to Houston. Who are these ladies? This is Chris, right? She has a podcast too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Chris is a friend of mine. The other one is just a personal friend of mine.
Cool.
And Chris is, she has her podcast, Elephant in the Room, I think it's
Shout out
called.
to Chris.
Yes. She has that with Ariel. She was actually the first person to interview me and my co-host Butaino on her show. So that was really nice of her. But I run into her at like almost every conference I attend. So yeah, she's great.
That's awesome. Okay, so how did it go though? Because I've already spoken to Dr. Kripal, and he's a very warm person, you know. I'm sure he's the same way everywhere he goes, but who were the speakers? What's your overall impression on what was talked about? Which speaker spoke to you the most? And then we'll reserve a specific part for Carl Nell, because I think we need to talk about that citizen effort that he presented there. So let me know.
I mean the list of speakers is online. I don't have it in front of me now, but
it's kind of long, isn't it?
Yeah. They were pretty quick presentations. The format was almost like 15, 20-minute presentations, which allowed for a lot of speakers and a lot of interesting topics. Some were in specific like panel discussions. Like this one was the closing, I believe, the closing panel. But some were in this format where each one would speak individually for like 15, 20 minutes, and then there would be a wider Q&A for all of them afterwards. And the presenters they ranged from, I mean, you had Admiral Tim Gallaudet talking about USOs and bringing in, there you go, bringing in new data from, or new publicly presented data from Richard Doty's new book. So we had some cool images shown from the book there, and some stories around that. He even talked about a case in Richard Doty's book that had this, like, I don't have a picture of it here, but there was a drawing oh my God, I said Richard Doty. Jesus. Richard Dolan. You didn't even catch me.
No, I did, but Dolan. I was like, Doty wrote a book about
no,
USOs?
sorry, Tim. No. Richard Dolan's new book. I'm sorry, Richard.
I'm sure Tim's gonna love this.
Oh man. Whoa. No, Richard Dolan, the amazing researcher, his new book on USOs. Tim took some images and drawings with permission from there, and one of them was this, like, it was a boat or a sub, I forgot. I think it was a boat with a spiral pattern of lights in the water underneath it, like a massive spiral. And Tim actually gave this anecdote of having witnessed something like that himself during his service.
What?
But he said it was not actually anomalous because they figured out what it was. It was phytoplankton, luminous phytoplankton. That basically float. They were in a part of the sea, I forgot where they were, where the currents in the water kind of converged because of different channels, and it created this spiral pattern in the currents under the boat, and the phytoplankton would like align and just flow with the spiral. So they would just light up, and it looked like this massive spiral lit up under their boat. So yeah, that was interesting. But the other cases he presented, he said he presented them as anomalous USO cases, and some of them were fascinating.
Nice.
Yeah, so you had people like him. Yep, this was one of my favorite panels. You had Mike Cleland here, the author of The Messengers and a few other books. You had Dr. Kimberly Engels over there on the left, and a friend of mine, Darren King, to the right of her, exo-academian.
Yeah, Darren is amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, this panel, like Mike talked about some of his letters that he's received around owls, and some artwork that was there, and some of the stories that he's come across, and just the way in which these phenomena to not align with our physicalist reductionist model of reality, and the role that owls play from a shamanic perspective and animist perspective in these phenomena. Kim, one of my favorite presentations was Darren's and Dr. Kim Engels. They just this was
It's not
from
the same, right?
no, these they move very fast. Sorry. So yeah,
Okay.
Kim is actually on the Archives of the Impossibles metadata project that Jeff is leading. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's being done in conjunction with the John Mack Institute.
Yeah,
And
he told me about that, Dr. Kripal.
yeah, so
Yeah,
this was the first time they got to like publicly reveal some of their initial findings. So that was fascinating.
nice.
They didn't do it on this panel, but the next one. But Kim is a part of that team. Darren was consulting on that team as well. That was fascinating. Kim, I recently took an online course with Kim on UFOs and shamanism, and that was like one of the coolest courses I've taken. And it just shows you the type of people and academics they have working on this project, and kind of following in the footsteps of Dr. John Mack, who came to some of these realizations. So yeah, it was really cool to see that in this academic format.
You know, something that I really gripe with is that the reason I cover Jacobo so much is because he's not acknowledged to have done a lot of this work. And in my opinion, he's the one who's done the most work about shamanism in general from a scientific standpoint. And
Sorry, who
it
was it?
really,
I didn't catch the name.
Jacobo Greenberg, the
Oh yeah,
Mexican doctor
Jacobo.
who
Yeah,
disappeared. Yeah.
yeah,
And I don't know, I've been trying to talk to Dr. Kripal about probably in the future trying to integrate his work into the archives because I think it's important. And and he told me that there was work in other languages already, so that shouldn't be a problem, you know. And I just wish that more people from these topics that are like scientists and all would acknowledge the work that he's done because a lot of people mention many names like Dr. John Mack, who is a powerhouse in its own right.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because his case is really weird. But yeah,
No, that would be
uh,
fascinating to have like information from people like him more a part of this. And um, yeah, I think there is this. It's unfortunate that maybe not unfortunate, but I think it's the reality that we're in, where this topic is being led by people primarily from the U.S.
yeah,
For the most part, and Western nations, or English speaking nations. And uh, there's I think the good people in this community realize that there are valuable resources outside of this, and
yeah.
across history outside of this. And I think it's just a matter of actually putting into practice that realization, and getting their work involved in these
Yeah.
types of projects.
And
And
there
some
are other many authors because Alex and I are big proponents of Greenberg, but there've been like people from Spain, people from Brazil, people from other parts of South America, Central America,
yeah,
that they did a lot of great work and it's not acknowledged. And I hope that we can help enact some change there.
yeah,
I'm gonna try though.
yeah, I am too. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you one more thing before we move on to Carl Nell.
Sure.
Did Professor Pasolka present?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
What was that like? Please, whatever you can share of her presentation.
Um, Actually, I'm trying to remember if she had a full presentation. She was more like the person who would introduce a lot of panels.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I don't recall if she had a full presentation. It's still a whirlwind because it was so much information.
What about Whitley Strieber? He was there,
He did
right?
not. Yeah, he was there. He did not present, but there was this cool moment. I really hope it was captured because they have professional cameras there. I hope that Q&A was also captured. I think it was, and it was. I think it was the very last panel, like the closing panel that you showed earlier on with Jeff and Karen Austin, and I forgot who else was on there.
This one?
Yeah, and Diana. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, someone asked a question. I don't even recall the question because the answer was so amazing. But someone asked a question to the panel, and Whitley, they answered it, and then they passed the mic to Whitley to ask the next question, right? But Whitley jumps in and just starts going back to the previous question and answering it himself. And then there was this like kind of like funny, lighthearted, awkward exchange between him and Jeff. And he's like, you see Jeff kind of not here. I don't think this was it, but Jeff kind of starts like giggling in the background. And then Whitley notices and he's like, oh my God. He's like, oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. Like, I don't mean to answer for you. If you don't want me to, it's fine. I'm sorry. And then Jeff is like, no, Whitley, just do it. Just go. Like, and everyone started clapping and they're like, yeah, Whitley, like we want to hear it. So it was this cool moment. And Whitley gave like such an amazing answer. Really just discussing like the way that he gave a very like non-dual answer to these phenomena and how we approach it. And it was really good to hear that like it was the perfect way to close the conference, I think.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move on to this because this is something that I made a video about. I used your tweets for that. But I want to hear what you have to say about Carl Nell and this new plan, this modified plan, because it's kind of similar to the one he presented at Seoul.
Yeah.
But what were like the things that jumped out to you the most from his presentation?
Sure. I mean, primarily, first thing he said was the first phase. Sorry, it's a little blurry now, but I forgot what date it says there. I think January 2024, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, the phase one, he really said that phase one, like that they were banking on the UAP Disclosure Act to be the thing that breaks through phase one. And because that was we're now 2 year, it's been twice put forth and not passed. He said that it is off target. If you see that the triangle there. Yeah. So we're now off target with the start of that. And he really said that we can't really get into the next phases unless you have some massive piece of legislation like that, which he helped author. Something like that to lay the groundwork for this to happen coming from the government.
And what about the citizen effort to disclose? Did he mention anything about that? Because I know that he recently, I noticed, I'm sure everybody did, he recently left the UAPDF, and I'm not sure what he's going to do next. I don't know if he talked about it, but do you know if he has any opinion on the private and citizen efforts that are taking place besides the government one?
I'm going to apologize. I don't recall if he discussed that in his presentation. He may have, but I mean, kind of my intuitive answer to that, based on what I've heard from him, would be that he is open to that, and he didn't try to portray this as just a government effort. I did point out in my tweet that non-governmental was added to the title of this slide. In previous presentations, it didn't have that. It just said UAP disclosure. So he does see and acknowledge the benefit of that, for sure, of having a more decentralized approach in addition to this, and as part of it, complementing it. It does list the private sector down there in line of effort D as being important for this, and as well as the scientific and academic even before that. So,
Okay.
and the interesting thing that I took out of this was that there was a line of effort E, healthcare, that was added that was not there before. And the most interesting part was the last part in that parentheses, human potential. That was definitely not there before.
No.
So yeah, so Carl, if you've ever heard Carl speak, this guy's like a genius, man. Like he he has a very multidisciplinary, in-depth multidisciplinary understanding of these topics that I cannot even begin to come close to. And he definitely seems to be open to more of the consciousness side of this. And it came out there in the human potential part as well. So that was interesting. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
did. I did
Sorry.
see him at an event with Pasolka and Jesse
Yeah.
Michaels, and
Yeah. The
in this event,
event.
yeah, Hereticon.
Yeah.
And those types of events usually talk about uh, more spiritual stuff, and angels, demons, and all that stuff. And before we leave, I wanted to ask you about that a little bit.
Sure.
What is your perspective on that? Because I see that Professor Pasolka, Jacques Vallée, even Jesse Michaels at some point have said that we may be dealing with something spiritual in nature or angelic, demonic. What do you think about that?
I think our definition of spiritual is flawed, and very, stuck in certain constructs. I do think these phenomena are much beyond our standard definitions of spiritual or physical, and I think that is the greater reality. Is this like combination, this nuanced, complex combination of the two, and that's where these phenomena reside, in my opinion. Um, and in relation to angels and demons, I think that there's such a wide breadth of experiences and of non-human intelligences that there very well could be, the biblical angels and demons as part of that in these realms, in within this like substrate of consciousness that leaks into our physical reality here and there. Um, I definitely don't believe, though, that they are exactly as identified and defined within religious traditions. There's a lot of distortion and wherever humans come into play, and
Oh,
wherever
yeah.
history and writing about these topics comes into play, and how stories get passed down, and archetypes get formed. And there's a lot of syncretism across traditions and cultures and religions with some of these beings and figures and gods that we mentioned earlier. Like, these things span different cultures and take on different shapes and names and identities, with some common themes across them. So, yeah, for angels and demons, I think they exist. I don't think that, I just think they're not what we think they are. I think that they are some of these beings that people interact with, but just a very small percentage of them. I don't think that the entire phenomenon singular can be attributed to angels and demons by any means.
Yeah, and I also think that we tend to anthropomorphize.
Yes.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a difficult word to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we like want to give it meaning to that, a meaning that we feel comfortable with. But maybe those things, whatever they are, we don't really fully understand what's going on. But
No,
I don't know if we will.
the same way that, like, nowadays some people have called all these things aliens, or in the past maybe they called all these things fae or fairies. That was the term for paranormal in parts of Europe. Um, Even further back, they probably just called it all angels and demons. But in reality, there's so many different things going on, so many. Yeah, so they're just terms. It's just language, that humans put onto things that are non-human and so far beyond our conception of humanity. That
Yeah, I just wish dragons are real. That's all I want, really.
Yeah, I'm sure they are in some reality or some different timeline, or I don't know what, man. This shit is
um,
so weird.
okay, so Anthony, before we leave, can you please tell the people where they can find you
Yes.
And yeah, where they can find your podcast too.
Yep. You can find us at Obliterate the Construct. Anywhere you find your podcast or social media, we're on there. We do stream video content through YouTube for now, but audio is available wherever you stream your audio podcasts. So if you just search Obliterate the Construct, I think we're at Obliterate the Construct on Instagram, and I think at Ob the Construct, OB the Construct on X or Twitter. So
Okay, cool. And what about you? If they want to find you, or
yeah,
just with the podcast is enough?
yeah, that's great. If you want to find my personal account on X, it is at ooh
Anthony
Well,
Anthony
but
underscore Sater, right?
I think at Cedar underscore Anthony. You're right. Thank you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Cedar
it.
underscore
Yeah,
Anthony. Shout out to my Lebanese heritage there. Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I want to thank you for a great conversation. I hope we could do this again soon. And I want to thank you for being brave and speaking with experiencers and giving them the place that they so terribly deserve, because they've been ignored for the longest time. And I think podcasts like yours are the beginning steps of something that can help them come to gripes with whatever they're experiencing. And we are, because as I told you, I think we all are experiencers. So thank you,
Yeah.
Anthony, for your
Thank you
work.
so much for having me on, Pavel, and keep up the great work you're doing as well. It's definitely needed in the space. Thank you.
I'll do my best. Have a good one,
Cool.
guys. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you, Anthony. Take
Thanks.
care.